Those were the dark days. We had started out with a partner and I, and it was just two of us, and our objective really was to do small projects for people that didn't have a high stake, so we could work and make some money and not kill ourselves. Well, pretty quickly we started getting high profile gigs and a lot of good opportunities, and we just kind of took that and ran with it. We never really had much of a business plan. So as we built the company, we mostly just built based on need and things like our intern was good enough so they stuck around, kind of thing. And we had cobbled together a patchwork of people that was working fairly well but had a certain degree of limitation to it. And when you start hitting that ceiling in the growth of a business, it can become frustrating. And over the course of the previous couple of years, we brought in a couple of other partners, and we were at 12 people, which obviously isn't a ton, but it's a lot of different perspectives to merge together, and it was becoming an untenable situation where some folks weren't getting along, and the work really wasn't developing in the way that we had hoped the work would be developing and improving. We decided to look outside the organization for help, and I had obviously known from the neighborhood and the town, Teresa and Allegory. I don't know how to talk about you as if you're not there, but I've been familiar with the work. How do you do it, or how do you do it properly? Those are two different questions. The folks that we had brought in as partners I originally started the business with a colleague of mine who I'd worked with 15 years ago, and it was kind of a whim. He said, "You want to do this?" And I said, "Okay, let's do it." So we did it. And then when we realized we wanted to get some different brains in, we brought in some people that we had worked with ourselves in the past who had had some good experiences. And on one level, that's a really good way to start a relationship because there's already a lot of baked in history and a lot of experience. But as with any relationship, even when you're taking a client in and making them an employee, you understand that people have different perspectives. And the things that you don't necessarily see in a day-to-day, in a casual relationship, really come out when you're in the trenches with somebody on a day-to-day basis. And your vision as a leader may not necessarily match their vision. Or it may match in principle, but they don't necessarily follow through on it. So it was incredibly important for us to get on the same page. And the work that we did with Allegory allowed us to do that. And as a result, and perhaps I'm jumping ahead, but as a result, we're all growing together much more effectively. But it's everything down to the way you think about the business, the way you approach how you come to work, and the energy you bring to work, and whether or not you're concerned about the details or the big picture or everything in between. It's just incredibly important as you grow a business to get everybody in alignment on that. Okay, so the first step I think in the process with Allegory was going through these surveys of the company and of the individuals, and it was incredibly enlightening, insightful. No, that's not the right word. Illuminating is probably the right word. It was an incredibly illuminating process because what it did was, on the one hand, it allowed us to really understand what we had in terms of assets. We were not in a position where we could wake up one day and say, okay, we're going to hire 15 new people tomorrow and throw out the ones we have. It was more important to us to understand what people's strengths were so we could play to people's strengths and build on those strengths. So the culture talk is fundamentally a branding exercise in many ways, but there's an incredible amount of organizational benefit to it as well, and that's really where we focused on it. There was a little bit of trying to shape our own brand, but a lot about trying to shape our team. So understanding who we had as in our crew and how to get the best of them was incredibly valuable and really, really important to us moving forward. I said the same thing like 3 times, so hopefully I got it one way you wanted it. From an organizational perspective, and getting that feedback on us, that was also, it's in many ways it's almost the more difficult stuff to hear, but it was significantly more important. The ability to have somebody reflect back to you what it is you're actually bringing as opposed to what it is you think you're bringing is incredibly powerful, and the only thing that it can do to you is make you a stronger individual and a stronger leader and a stronger leadership team. What we're able to do through this exercise is say, okay, you're playing this role, you're playing that role, you're playing this role, but really what you could be doing is with a slight shift going into this position and taking this space. And if we put those 4 individuals together, all with just a slight shift, we actually have something that's really powerful and good and can really move us to a different place. And that's what we were able to do by looking at ourselves, understanding where the slight shifts were and what we were doing to keep ourselves from accomplishing that, and then figuring out what role each of the 4 of us played as a unit really allowed us to get together in a way that we're growing fast, we're doing great work, we're working together well, and everybody's got a very clear role, and the clarity of the roles and the understanding of not just your job is this, but your position in the company, your vibe, the energy you're bringing is just having the clarity is incredibly important. My name's Steve. I'm the CEO of a company called 3 Group. We're a market research firm based here in Saratoga, but we also have offices in Los Angeles, Providence, and Raleigh, North Carolina. We work with category leaders around the world on a variety of different initiatives, from programming and branding development for networks to technology and usability experiences for technology companies to simply how people approach food in the grocery store. We have a small roster of clients, but they tend to be category leaders, and the way that we think about and approach work is very much a partnership kind of thing. We're an independent company. We're not beholden to shareholders or anything like that. We're mostly beholden to finding better ways to do better work for our clients. So what happened was, after we had the folks at Allegory interview everybody and we went through the culture talk surveys, we sat down remotely and spent 3 or 4 hours working through what we have in terms of a leadership group, in terms of a company, in terms of our assets, all the individual assets that we have. And if you look at the culture talk idea, if you look at the concept, everybody's bucketed into different archetypes. And it's very easy to start to see, if you're this kind of company, these are the kinds of archetypes you kind of want to have. It was really based on, and forgive me for getting the names wrong, but it's really based about seeking the truth, being a master of what you're taking over, and telling good stories. So we're able to look across our group and talk about and think about who is bringing those properties in terms of the team, who is bringing them in terms of leadership and how to identify that. But more importantly, ever since we've done that, now we're using this every time we hire somebody. And we're still massaging a little bit about how we incorporate this into this hiring decision. We've yet to look at somebody's and say, nope, you're not right for us, if they're great otherwise, but it's definitely becoming a tool that we're starting to look at and say, okay, this person definitely has that organizational capability that we need in that role. And it's helping us hire better people, and really the quality of the people that we're bringing in since we started with this has been significantly better. I think one of the unexpected benefits of the whole experience was the things that you don't really think about on a day-to-day basis. So the way that you understand how you come off to other people, the way you understand how you're putting forth your ideas, is having that inner awareness that what may not necessarily have been there before is really powerful, because it allows you to pause, readjust, and think about, all right, this person that I'm talking to, I understand this is the way that they receive information better. I can get more out of them if I come at them from this approach versus that approach. And it makes you aware of things that you hadn't necessarily thought about before, and you understand yourself a little better. When you're working within a leadership group, and we have essentially 4 equal partners, even though I have a slightly more senior role, I still have an obligation to work with and get the best of them and make sure that they're coming to work and feeling good about what they're doing. And understanding who they are and understanding how I'm coming across and trying to find the union between those things is really powerful. From an organizational perspective, the impact is powerful. From an organizational perspective, one of the things that you can pull out of this, which is incredibly useful, is the understanding that everything that you read from every cultural list that's out there about millennials is actually wrong. It's that simple. They want structure. They want guide rails. They want a career path. They want to know where they are and where they fit within the large organization. We had come into this experience with Allegory with an incredibly flat, almost socialistic kind of organization where everybody was on a very similar plane. And what happens in that scenario is you end up with the person who has the leadership role is just the person who is the most forceful about it. And as it turns out, that's not necessarily the best way for an organization to function. So by going through this process and getting some perspective on the value of having an org chart and the value of having people in different places and understanding who they were going to and where, the clarity of the roles really made the way that we work internally much stronger. And as somebody said to me just recently, your crew is much happier. And I think that has a lot to do with it. From an external perspective, we rethought the way that we structured our teams from our clients' perspective. What we had had previously was a team that was very focused on the 4 people at the top of the organization. From a client perspective, people wanted to work with Steve or Andrea or Chad, and obviously that has scalability issues, and there's challenges inherent in that. But what we were able to do was take it, and we turned our brand from Steve, Chad, and Andrea, and Steve, to 3, and get people talking about 3 by taking that primary level of responsibility and that primary sort of client-facing role and shifting it down just a little bit. And obviously you don't wake up one day and you say, okay, now you're going to do this job and have this relationship. It takes a lot, and we're still 2 years into managing a process of pushing the center down a level, which then allows us to scale. But we put in a sort of a client relationship that has what we call strategists at the center. And then we built, but because a lot of these people were fairly young, because we couldn't throw them out, as we talked about before, we couldn't just completely cast everybody out the door, as we talked about before. We had to make some adjustments. So we built an infrastructure around them, a network around them, to both challenge them and get the best out of them, but also keep them from failing. So they're the hub of it now, but everything revolves around them, and it's worked much better, and it's allowed us to scale the business out, do better work. And from the perspective of the person who's living down here, where in the past they had just really functioned in a support role, they're now much more forward facing in the client, they're much more forward facing in the thinking, and they really seem to be enjoying the jobs much better. We call it Purina. The old Purina logo.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And that literally came out right when we were, literally the same day that we were in Belize and we were talking about this stuff. We got off the teleconference with you and just started throwing things up on the wall, and we built it out right there almost immediately after we got off the phone with you. And it's the same way that we've been doing it ever since, and it's working beautifully. So had we not been part of that conversation with Allegory, I don't know that we ever would have had the inspiration to completely redesign our business and how we interact with clients. But had we not done that, I don't know that we'd be here today either. One of the things that we used to do a lot of was the reporting structure was very much a spider web. Now it is very much more linear, and everybody knows who they're working with. And some of that is a function of personalities and vibe, and some of it's a function of physical location. It's spread out over four offices. You've got it's fundamentally better to have people talking to each other in person than it is even on a teleconference. So a lot of that was driven by that. But in terms of the leadership crew, understanding again who everybody was and what energy they could bring, whether you're a caregiver or a master or a sage, and letting us focus on our strengths has been really good, because it allows us to use our time smarter and get more out of our time. Because the fundamental, one of the things we just started doing was we changed the way we bid projects, and we started billing in people's time instead of just going, well, it should be 3 times more than that. It's much smarter. And now that we're understanding that and we're seeing that time is money, it makes it that much more apparent that you want to get the most out of that investment in human time, and being able to understand this is what Andrea does well, and this is what Steve does well, and this is what Chad does well. Going through that process with Allegory has allowed us to fine tune it and make sure that not only is the company getting the best of everybody in leadership, but everybody individually is getting the best from the experience of being here.